Hello all, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and I'm here today with a video update for this 1/6 scale German Panzer II Ausf kit. Since the last video, the model has been painted, last of its details have been added, and the model currently sits here completed. To finish the model, I needed to add all the Pioneer tools. Some of the tools required a little bit of modification prior to painting and installation, which we will go over now. For the tank's jack, the kit supplies you with a Panzer II style jack. The jack itself is comprised of a few components. You have the jack body, which we have here, which is the biggest part. We have here the back faceplate, which has already been glued on in the scene. We have here a lock pivot. This here is the crank handle, and this here would be the back plate. The jack itself is appropriately detailed in that it will do the job. However, there are some things to make of note with this kit piece here that we'll be going into. One thing as of note, the instructions has a typo when it comes to assembling the jack. Here goes the dialog box here with an illustration of how the jack is supposed to be assembled. Now, I wasn't able to check if the parts were properly numbered. However, they are very easy to find on the runner. One thing as of note is that the jack illustration has everything pictured except for the jack's crank handle that we have here. If we notice, it is not on the illustration. However, it is present on the bottom illustration dialog box, which has all of the tool layout for the one side of the vehicle. As we can see there's the jack handle. The way the jack handle is supposed to be glued on to the jack is you have the jack here. It will be going on the vehicle in this manner. If we notice, the jack gets glued on upside down. This is not a gaff or anything, and this is done on purpose. The jack handles were temporarily bolted upside down like that for storage reasons. When in the field you would need it, you would unscrew that bolt, flip it right side up, and then bolt it back onto the jack, and you were ready to go. The way it gets glued onto the model is you put a little drop of glue there. There's the hole, and the handle itself would be positioned underneath the jack as so. I've tried it and will fit in the jack mounts that the kit gives you perfectly. As for the details, like I said earlier, the details are very basic. However, we'll give you a basic jack and will look good on the model. To improve the jack, it needs a couple things. First of all, the way this jack worked was this plate here would be positioned on the jack chassis over here, and on the real vehicle or on the real jack would be able to pivot. This piece here would actually lock onto the tank or any other item that you're jacking, and the reason why it is pivotable is for you to get a better grip on the object. The way the jack is the way it works is that you have the handle. Here's your small little gearbox. There are several gears in here that when would turn would move a large geared plate to which this little stem here would be connected to. As we can see, there's nothing in here. It's hollow. On the real jack, there is a geared plate that this piece here is actually integral. It's integrally casted into. And this is actually what goes up and goes down and is what jacks up the vehicle. The jack completed with all the mods added. Here's the front and here's the back. There's the geared plate that's fabricated out of a piece of Lexan. For the actual notches, I just used a triangular shaped needle file and just went over each one in a certain pattern. There's the knurling done to the top pivot. The knurling is just done with an X-Acto knife, and I just went over in a crisscross pattern. The knurling was also done to the base plate here. And again, just same technique with a X-Acto blade. Once the piece is painted, these knurlings will pop out a lot more, especially after the dry brushing is done to them. The jack now is going to be painted, weathered, and then mounted to the vehicle. As I mentioned in an earlier video, the kit supplies you with the jack block. What the jack block does, it allows you to position the jack on top of it so that you can jack up the tank. Now, the kit's version of the jack block, as we notice, is very plain and is missing a lot of detail. The real jack blocks themselves were fabricated out of wood. So rather than trying to replicate this piece, trying to make it in wood, I went ahead and fabricated a brand new one out of wood. This here is the replacement jack block. It is a square stock of wood and has been sanded to the same dimensions as the plastic counterpart. The support straps that you see here are real metal, and it's fastened to the wood block via these small rivets. These rivets are the same ones that I use on the tank's fenders, which their size and number are found in an earlier video. The jack block itself has a resin working handle and is fully functional. The jack block has been fully painted and weathered and will now be mounted to the vehicle. For the tanks, crowbar, and picks, the kit supplies you with the two tools right here. The parts are separately molded and do have the right size and shape. The one issue about them is that the clamp is molded in. As I've said in an earlier video, all the tool posts have been removed so that they were replaced with brass ones because the molded in ones were a bit chunky, as we see here. Because I changed the way the tools mount to the vehicle, the molded in tool posts will no longer be needed. The problem is that if you look on the back part here of the molding, you'll see that it's a hollow cast, in that the actual tool post itself is hollow, has a cavity, so if you grind this down, if you try to remove it, the whole thing will probably just fall apart. Because of that, I will need to remove this whole part here of the crowbar and replace it with a new one. Fortunately, the kit kind of gives you one already on hand. This plastic rod here was actually part of the kit. It was supposed to be the brace that connects the two idler wheels together on the lower hull. In an earlier video, I noted that this kit supply part was replaced with a thinner brass piece because of overall looks. Because of that, I now have this part here as a spare. If we notice, the two rods are practically identical in thickness, and unlike this part here where it has that hollow cavity, this plastic rod here is completely solid. So I will amputate this portion here of the crowbar and replace it with the other plastic rod. Now, just like the large crowbar, the smaller crowbar has the same story. Now, to replace this piece here, I'm not going to have enough rod. However, fortunately, since I'm going to be cutting off the rod off of this one, as we can see, there's still plenty of rod. So what I'm going to do is, after this handle here is removed, I will then shorten it again and machine a small cone on the end, a small point, and shorten it and then add it to this crowbar here. That way, both crowbars will be complete and will be ready for installation. And here go the completed, modified crowbars. As you can see, they look like they're one piece, and they're totally smooth without any imperfections for where those big, clunky, molded-on tool posts would have been. Here's the large one, and here's the short one. The short one itself, I turned the small little cone on the lathe, and here goes the original one for comparison. As you can see, there's still some scrap pieces left over from the other crowbar handle, which was used for the modification. Now, in case you actually use the plastic rod that the kit supplies you for the kit's purpose, in that it locks the two idlers together, you can still do this mod because the runners that the kit gives you are pretty much the same thickness of the actual rod itself. This here is on the E runner, or the M runner, and you could easily just clip off these pieces off the sprue, sand them down a little bit, and do the exact same conversion. Also, as of note, when you're doing this conversion, keep in mind that the rods are not simply glued together. That bond is far too weak. The best way to do it is with a small Dremel. You drill a small hole in both the head and on the stem. And what you do is you glue in a piece of wire or in my case a wire brad, and then you just plug the two together also with glue. The adhesive plus the fastener gives you a stronger bond, and there's no risk of the piece ever getting old or brittle and breaking on you in the future. For the tank's manual inertia starter crank handle, the kit supplies you with two versions. One version here is found on the I runner, while the other version here is found on the D runner. The kit wants you use for the fender mounted crank handle is the version on the I runner. Now the problem is with the version on the I runner is that if we look behind it, we notice that the molded in tool post is again hollow underneath. Rather than trying to fabricate a brand new one, I'm going to be using the kit's D version crank handle. The version on the D runner is pretty much the same size and is the same shape, only has a little bracket molded in for where the piece would lock into the fender. But more importantly, if we notice that the tool clamp here, it's a solid plastic casing, which means sanding it down is going to be a lot easier than trying to go ahead and sand down and remove something like this. Once this piece is removed, the piece will be simply painted, weathered, and added to the vehicle. Before the piece is painted, here goes the completed crank starter handle. On top we have the kit original from the I runner, and this is the modified D runner version. As we can see, the molded in tool post has been deleted and has been sanded flush. Also, what was deleted was the molded in tool clamp that was on this portion here of the molded in handle. The reason why the clip was removed was for two reasons. One, the chunky molded in clip didn't really match the details that were added to the tank's fenders. But more importantly, the reason why I deleted it was because to mount it to the fender, the piece would have been installed with the clamp upside down. So because of that one reason, I went ahead and sanded it off flush. Another thing that was done, if we look at the kit original, it has a domed end to it. And on the real crank handles, they were pretty much a hollow pipe that were bent and had notch cut into them. So the dome was squared off and was drilled out. The same thing was also done to this end here. If we notice, the notch area is as per the kit, that wasn't touched, but I went ahead with a drill bit and hollowed it out to give the appearance that the whole piece is made out of a solid, or I'm sorry, a hollow one-piece tube. As for the tow cable's S-shackle, this is the kit version right here. Now, as to point out, the kit version did have a molded-in tool post, as like all the rest of the kit supply tools. And unfortunately, like the other tools where they're either easily to remove or you have to manipulate them with another part of the runner or the kit, on the S-shackle, that's not the case. The only way to go through it is you just have to literally go through it. You have to remove the molded-in tool post, which will leave a small gap on either side of the tool of the S because it was molded hollow underneath for the tool post. And luckily, though, that the piece does have an internal like circle molded in. That circle keeps the piece from falling apart, but you have to be very careful when you're sanding down the access. Then to just plug up the small little gaps on either end, I just used a drop of putty on either side. Once the red putty dries, it just gets sanded down, and the piece will then be ready for finishing and installation. Here we have the tank's shovel and axe completely painted and weathered. As we notice, the handles on the kit supplied shovel and axe have been replaced with real wooden ones. These are indeed the kit supply parts as was shown in the earlier video, all in gray. And here go the original wooden handles. This here is the original wooden handle for the axe, and this one here is the original wooden handle for the shovel. As we can see, the wooden handles are they're completely sized off of the plastic ones and are a perfect fit. Now, after the glue dries on the wooden handles, these pieces will be mounted to the tank permanently. Quick walk around the vehicle. We have here all the tools that were previously mentioned have all been added in their respective locations. The radio channel, or the radio antenna channel, which is fabricated out of wood, which was discussed in an earlier video, has been weathered. As we can see, the wood is left exposed on the edges, as if it was scratched. And the antenna has also been added to the vehicle. The kit does supply you with a plastic antenna. However, I felt that the plastic antenna was a little too flimsy, so in its place I replaced it with one fashioned from brass. The brass antenna is a lot more sturdier and has a better appearance to it. As, like I mentioned in an earlier video, when the model is in storage or not being displayed, the antenna retracts back into its antenna channel, like so.